It's absolutely no secret that Death Stranding is one of the most divisive game releases of all time. With its unique Strand-type gameplay, Death Stranding left Hideo Kojima fans split across the board as to whether or not Death Stranding is a good game. Developed by the brand new Kojima Productions and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment and released on November 8, 2019, Death Stranding was the first solo effort by Hideo Kojima after splitting from Konami, and he aimed to create a unique experience unlike any other game released before. Being Kojima's first major solo project after a split from the boys over at the Big K, Kojima had the unfortunately monumental task of living up to the Metal Gear franchise, a task that is not simple whatsoever. Although it was slammed by critics at its release, raising much skepticism in the gaming community, a subsequent re-release on Steam that was spearheaded by 505 Games in 2020 was met with overwhelmingly positive reviews. This begs the question, is Death Stranding a good game? Was it simply released at the wrong time? Did people just not get it when it came out? And what in the flying fuck even is a Strand-type game? Well, for one, I most certainly believe that the events of 2020 made the themes of Death Stranding more relevant today than ever before. With the pandemic dividing people and putting up walls, people have seen themselves feeling more isolated than ever before. Death Stranding is a game about reconnecting and people being there for each other, so, given these circumstances, this is a message that is needed during these trying times. Even so, this doesn't change the initial complaints about the game regarding the gameplay and the extremely confusing story, something that is very common amongst Kojima games. Of course, these criticisms made me extremely wary of playing Death Stranding. So much so that I bought the game back in 2019 and didn't even touch it until 2021, almost 2 years after getting the game. Behind all of the criticisms, initial doubts about playing the game, finicky gameplay, and extremely confusing story beats, I found one of the most unique and one-of-a-kind gaming experiences I've ever played to date. Death Stranding is inundated with problems, there's absolutely no doubt about that. But behind that, there's a touching story and a bright vision from a brand new development studio that's eager to show the world what it's capable of. Death Stranding is a flawed yet ambitious game, and although it may be divisive, it's created many new Hideo Kojima fans eager to see what the next release from the studio has to offer. For every massive flaw the game has, it also has numerous clever and ingenious ideas that never failed to impress me whenever I played. Maybe it didn't quite come out as intended, and maybe it didn't stick the landing, but even so, Death Stranding has really good ideas and something to say. That being said, let's dive into this beast of a game and see what it's really all about. This one's been a very, very long time coming, so strap in and get ready. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Morg. Death Stranding was a thing, and I'm here to talk about it. The gameplay is, you guessed it, fucking walking. Alright, all jokes aside, the general gameplay loop of Death Stranding consists of you delivering packages of varying shapes and sizes from point A to point B to either get some sort of reward from a client or to reconnect the scattered pieces of America. Obviously, this gameplay loop has a lot of walking, which might sound very boring, and I'll admit that it is at the start, but it has a lot more nuance to it and it ramps up in intensity as the game goes on. The basic walking mechanic entails managing the overall weight and load of what you're carrying and balancing with the left and right triggers, all while traversing dangerous terrain filled with cliffs, rocks, crevices, terrorists, and monstrous beached things, or BTs for short. As you progress through the game, you unlock a range of upgrades such as motorcycles, trucks, the ability to pave roads and build zip lines, and much more to assist you on your travels. The aforementioned terrorists/mules and BTs serve as the game's enemies and are meant to be hurdles to delivering to certain areas, and they spice up the core gameplay quite a bit, even if they can be a bit annoyingly placed at times. Death Stranding is generally speaking a very relaxing experience, but the BTs and mules add an intense challenge that really up the ante when need be. A particular favorite gameplay moment of mine is during one mission where I had to recover a camera from a terrorist camp. I snuck up on the terrorist camp and noticed the guy with the camera climbing up a nearby cliff. When he climbed up the cliff, I shot him and the other guy with him down the cliff and jumped down after them. Then, I entered into a fist fight with the terrorist, took the camera, ran from multiple armed terrorists and terrorist vehicles, and escaped across a conveniently placed bridge that was put there by another player. Speaking of which, this conveniently segues into the next gameplay mechanic I wanted to talk about, the online features. Throughout the story, you connect more areas to something called the chiral network. Aside from story implications, the chiral network allows you to use network features in that region, meaning that you can see structures other players have built, and players can also see your structures as well. On top of this, players can also donate materials to your roads to help pave them further across the country. This means that you can use ropes, ladders, bridges, save areas, shelters, zip lines, vehicles, and all other kinds of things other players build, as well as communicating with other players in the area via a press of the touchpad. The online features of Death Stranding remind me a lot of Dark Souls, where none of the player interactions are direct, but players can help each other through portions of the game and come in clutch when you need it, which really bolsters the overall vibes of the game and complements the themes of community and being there for each other that is highlighted by the story, which is something I fuck with quite heavily. Of course, there are many good things about the gameplay, but it also has a lot of faults. For one, Death Stranding has the gunplay of my left butt cheek. It's not the absolute worst thing ever, and maybe I was doing something wrong, but the aiming was just kinda clumsy and didn't always work right. Fortunately, there's not much gunplay in the game, but the gunplay made me dread segments where it was necessary simply because the gunplay is one of the least fun parts of the game. Forest encounters are annoying for sure, but at the very least, the game gives you the ability to avoid mules and BTs altogether, making combat almost completely optional over the course of Death Stranding's runtime. Another thing that needs addressing is one particular part of the game that I just generally found to be kinda god-awful and unpleasant: the mountain segment. Death Stranding is by absolutely no means a high-octane, balls-to-the-walls, action-driven game, but the mountain segment makes the game slow to a complete crawl and just overstayed its welcome. The amount of BT encounters, slow walking, climbing, and maneuvering borderline bullshit terrain gave me a total headache, and I was just waiting for it to fucking end. You can build a zipline network to make it better, but even then, that takes a considerable amount of time and requires a lot of effort for an area that you're only going to be in for a few hours if you're just playing through the story. Even so, there's a host of other small problems, such as vehicles being kind of useless outside of paved roads and the climbing being a little jank. But all in all, the gameplay experience was far, far, far better than what I expected. A lot of critics said the game was slow and boring, but I found Death Stranding to be a relaxing experience with a hint of exhilarating action and intense sequences that kept the gameplay loop fresh and exciting, even if it's curtailed with minor problems and inconveniences. Love it or hate it, there's no doubt that Death Stranding is a beautiful game filled with pretty sights and gorgeous vistas for the player to feast their eyes upon. Not only is Death Stranding probably one of the most good-looking games on the PS4, but the minimal UI is designed to tell you everything you need to know without being visually obtrusive. Everything about the presentation is extremely well done, from the visuals, UI, sound design, music selection, and cinematography. All of these elements were carefully and deliberately planned out to create a cohesive experience, and they're 100% worth mentioning. Some of the sights in Death Stranding are borderline jaw-dropping and packed with painstaking detail, and the overall UI aesthetic complements the visual style of the game perfectly, while also being completely functional. The gear screen is easy to access and navigate, and the button prompts that show up for certain actions tell the player everything they need to know without being too flashy or in the way. The UI is well designed and doesn't have too much menu diving, and is also very easy to understand and digest even after not playing the game for a while. On top of this, the game has top-notch sound design, from the ambient noises, the BT sound effects, the crying of your BB unit, and the contextual songs that play during encounters such as a run-in with mules that let the player know they're in danger without directly telling them. This game also has extremely good cutscene direction with mocap acting and shots that look like something directly out of a movie. Even if the story itself was confusing, all of the scenes had top-of-the-line acting and directing that really made it feel like you're watching a movie whenever a cutscene played out, which gave the story beats a lot of weight and intensity. And last, but most certainly not least, the low roar moments in the game deserve a special mention. After certain story portions of the game, songs by a band called Low Roar play while you head towards your next objective. Each song was carefully selected to fit the current mood of the story, and these moments give you a moment to take in your surroundings and appreciate the environment around you. Whether it be taking your mother's body to the incinerator, climbing a snowy mountain, averting a bomb crisis, or scrambling to get from one side of the country to the other, all of these moments never failed to give me chills, and they give the game this really cool, like, artsy, hipster, indie movie kind of vibe, which I heavily dig and fuck with. In looking at all of these elements of the presentation, you can tell that Kojima and his team carefully crafted and wove together all of these concepts and ideas to create a cohesive vibe and aesthetic that gives Death Stranding a hell of a lot more of a personality than it has any right to have. Big pats on the back over to the fellas at the Big Kojima Productions. They truly did a good job at presenting this game with style and zest. As someone who's only mildly acquainted with Hideo Kojima's works, I at the very least understand that his plotlines are nothing short of confusing, bizarre, and entangled messes.
Big Boss, who is the same guy as Solid Snake except with an eye patch. Solid Snake, not Big Boss, sneaks into the air vent to save DARPA Chief, but then he dies.
The Metal Gear Solid franchise is known for its complex plot that's become somewhat of a cult classic over the years, and Death Stranding is cut from a very similar cloth. I would try to explain the plot of the game, but quite frankly, I would sound insane in doing so. The long and short of it is basically after an event known as the Death Stranding, the United States has been reduced to nothing and needs to be rebuilt. As the protagonist, Sam Porter Bridges, it's your job to reconnect America. This process involves linking up several vantage points to a network known as the Chiral Network, which is key in relaying communications and resources across varying regions of America. Of course, it gets a whole lot more complicated than that. There's a lot of scientific jargon thrown around, and once you get to the concept of beaches and repatriates and the origins of BBs, it starts to get extremely confusing. That being said, I fuck with the cheesy sci-fi vibes very heavy, even if I couldn't always rack my brain around it. The story is presented via the brilliantly directed mocap scenes, and quite frankly, the execution is nothing short of perfect. The actors all did a brilliant job with the script, and it was jam-packed with tension and emotion. The story is paced pretty slowly for most of the game, but it really picks up in the finale, which also happens to be one of my favorite parts of the game. The finale is a classic Hideo Kojima send-off filled with intense, action-packed sequences with heightened emotions and lots of cutscenes. The ending partly consists of a 3-stage fight with Higgs, one of the big baddies of the game, which is one of the most satisfying moments in the entire game. The first phase, where he's a giant BT, is pretty dope, but the real meat and potatoes lies in the last 2 stages. The second stage is one where you frantically try to catch Higgs with your strand and beat him to a bloody pulp. After this phase is over, the third phase turns into a classic Hideo Kojima one-on-one epic final battle. Having a fist fight with Higgs in a pool of tar in which both characters are desperately struggling to win was an extremely unexpected moment in a game about being a fucking UPS guy, but it's one of my absolute favorite moments in gaming, and it really is an awesome fight through and through. The rest of the finale is pretty dope, with cutscenes and beautiful scenery, and also a casual trek across the entire fucking map. Fuck this part, it's actually dumb. Anyways, despite not understanding the story entirely, the grand finale was truly becoming of the mastermind Kojima-san, and it comes close to matching up with the likes of Metal Gear Solid 4. A bold take, I know. I think I pretty much knew going in that the story would be pretty bonkers due to it being written by Kojima, and it feels like one of the least Japanese games I've ever played, but I enjoyed it while I was along for the ride. I separated the story and theme sections for a reason. Although they're interrelated, the story is more like a surface reading, while the theme is more of what the story itself was trying to convey. A little while back, I mentioned that the game didn't quite land with critics in 2019, but it seemed to resonate with players in 2020 when it released on Steam, and there's a very good reason for this. Now more than ever, Death Stranding is a relevant game. Not only is it relevant to current world events, but it's also been extremely relevant in my own life. Death Stranding might have a complicated story, but through that cloudy lens, there's a clear message communicated through not just the story, but also the gameplay. The concepts of human warmth, connecting with others, people being there for each other, and accepting one another permeates through each and every design choice in the game. Not only does Sam grow and finally open up and connect with people and come to care about them over the course of the game, but the player does as well. As the player connects new people to the chiral network and expands their ever-growing web of help and support, they begin to see things from other players, friendly signs, structures, vehicles, and the player even gets the ability to call out to others who are playing the game, almost as if they're trying to say, "Hey, I'm here and we're in this together." Life has been hitting pretty hard over the past year. Whether it be COVID or other life events, it seems easy to shut yourself out from others. And the lack of social interaction most students get from doing online school, it doesn't help much either. Personally, I'm coming off the tail end of recovering from an overdose, which I was hospitalized for, on top of dealing with a breakup, and during this time I've realized how much I need my friends and how much support I truly have if I just look around me. Death Stranding is a game about reaching out and looking around, just as I've been learning to do. There's so much warmth and kindness if you just reach for it. Maybe that didn't resonate at first, but I'm glad it resonated eventually. All of the fellas down at the big Kojima Productions put their heart and souls into letting us know we're never alone so long as we reach out. The story and gameplay may be flawed, but they have a heart and soul and a vibrant personality to boot. I've never played a game so focused on community and building it up as Death Stranding, and honestly, it's refreshing. So many games these days are competitive or have you working against other people, but for once we have a game about bringing people together. A game about bringing together the strands. I think that's what it means to be a Strand-type game, or at least that's my understanding of it. If that's what it means to be a Strand-type game, then I'm more than excited to see what Kojima Productions does next. I honestly wasn't expecting to like this game. In fact, I was expecting to strongly dislike it or even hate it, but I'm sure as you can tell by some of the things I said, I really, really enjoyed it, and Kojima Productions have made me a fan of their work. The game is clunky for sure, and the plot is confusing and all over the place. When the game is good, it's really, really good. But when it's bad, it can be really, really bad. Death Stranding didn't play anything safe, and it dared to be different in a market where developers constantly choose to play it safe and phone it in year after year after year. It had a lot of good ideas, some better executed than others, but overall it got through to me and resonated with me, and I can safely say it's now one of my favorite games, and I'm not alone at all in thinking this. If you take a look at the Steam reviews, you'll be hard-pressed to find many negative reviews, if any at all. As one of the reviews says, best walking/UPS delivery simulator ever. On the surface, it may not seem like your cup of tea, but if you want something different, something relaxing, something exciting, something with a great message, then I implore you to check this game out. You might end up being a fan too if you can get past some of the game's rough edges. I like this game a lot, but that's just me. Give it a shot for yourself and see what you think. So yeah, Death Stranding, it was a thing.
Someone tell me that I talk too much, but they just don't like it when I open up. I be talking on my shit cause I've had enough. So mysterious, I don't even talk at all. Axel, Ocelot, the man with a mask. It was him all along with a plan. It wasn't me. Now you can see Axel's back and free.